Okay, great. Everybody can see that okay?
Yeah, can everyone see? Thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing that. So welcome. We're here to discuss the recovery community pathways. And I see by some of the names that have joined, there's quite a number of people that are working within our active operational recovery communities, and also those that are due to open in the next few months as well. So a very warm welcome to all of you. Today we're going to look at the 4 stages of care. Elizabeth will speak through those and also look at the phase outcomes. And then we're going to look at the critical decision points, essentially, and treatment planning and what actual recovery skills develop in a recovery community based on like therapeutic community model, and how do we apply them in practice. I'll hand over to Elizabeth for the first slide.
Thank you. I know it's a lot to get through in an hour, so we're going to do our best. If there's things that we don't get a chance, that, like Paloma said, the PowerPoint will be put up with the presentation, and we always encourage people, if we don't get to a slide, if you have questions after the presentation, reach out to myself or Lindsay. We're always available to kind of have a chat with people. Okay, so when we're talking about initially, we're going to talk about the phases of care in a therapeutic community. Before I launch into this, though, I want to talk a little bit about kind of some of the stuff that goes into developing these phases of care. So when I think of the therapeutic community model, like I think of 2 big things. One of them is like the 5 components that go into the therapeutic community model. And then, of course, it's also about looking at the whole person. So I'll start with the 5 components of what we're going to be what goes into these phases. So the first one is that sense of belonging. And so, I think of addiction, and I think of, how it so often operates in isolation, and it so often creates things like distorted thinking that says, I'm alone. Nobody has gone through this. I can't talk about this. That don't talk, don't trust, don't feel kind of old messaging that comes with this. And what we want in therapeutic communities, and I think probably what everybody on these kind of this today wants, is that idea of when somebody comes into our care, they feel like they belong. They feel like there's safety, that they can have a voice, that they can talk, that they can connect, and they don't have to feel so alone. So when we're thinking of those phases, really keep in mind that concept of belonging, coming in and getting support and kind of going, I'm not alone in this journey anymore. Second one, and this is a really critical one, is that concept of narrative redevelopment. What we know, again, with addiction is it can be really isolating. And again, it can create those neural pathways in our brain that say things like, shame kind of comes in that says we're no good. Shame that comes in as we go against our morals and values when we're actually out in addiction, tell us that we've done things wrong, so nobody's going to love us, or we're unlovable. Or it just creates different pathways that say this is the only way I can do things. And when we think of that narrative redevelopment, and when we think of kind of the approach that we take in treatment, which is so much about kind of that concept of, we are more about that strength-based treatment as compared to shaking a finger at somebody and saying you're doing something wrong. So we want to redevelop that narrative in their brain that says, I'm bad, I'm wrong, I'm sick, to, I'm in recovery, I'm getting support, I belong to a community. Another big one is that concept of promoting pro-social behavior through things like responsible agency. That's a lot of fancy terms. And what it really means is the idea of we want, as a community, them to come together and teach each other how to live again a normal life. In therapeutic communities, especially like Lakeview, and probably a lot of kind of the ones that you guys work in, people get up at a regular time. They eat 3 meals a day. They have, at Lakeview, they have Triple P, which is Purposeful Pathways programs. It's quite a mouthful, but it's about kind of that idea of learning how to work again and learning some work ethic. And so they all give back to the community, as an example, as a pro-social behavior. We expect that they hold each other accountable and give feedback, both positive and supportive for growth. We expect that, that we don't swear on our sites. And all of these are those concepts of pro-social behavior and developing that concept of responsible agency. The 4th thing is that component of social learning. So they're all learning from each other as a community and learning from the staff. And so as staff, we are part of the therapeutic community. We are members, residents, participants, whatever language you kind of put towards it, but the staff are also part of it. Again, we're also all involved in that concept of social learning and teaching. And then, the fifth piece that we really want to keep in mind, and it's a concept that I'm sure you guys have all heard of, is that concept of recovery capital and developing more recovery capital for these folks and being able to assess, what are they missing in their domains? And, how do we help them develop more social capital so they have a community? How do we help them develop different types of capital? And so when they go out there, it's kind of like, I think of it like a bank account almost, or, this idea of developing all these assets to support our recovery. So when I go out there and I'm having a tough moment, I can go to all of my assets that are in my bank account or my assets that I've developed, and I can access them so that I don't have to do this by myself. So please keep all those things in mind when we're thinking of these phases. The other thing that I really want you to keep in mind when we're thinking of these phases and throughout this presentation is treating what we call the whole person. So we don't just say, this is addiction and we're treating this right here. And if we just kind of get rid of this, everything else is fine. We treat the brain, we treat the old distorted thinking, we treat kind of the physical component of the person. We understand who they and try to understand who they are spiritually, culturally. We try to understand, everything that comes into what has made this person who they are today and the journey that they've been on. So it's really about, as I said, treating the whole person and not just kind of saying, okay, we're only treating this piece here. Because as we know, addiction affects every part of the person. Okay, 4 stages. Lindsay knows I'm long-winded, and I apologize for that, guys. I always have a lot to say, and that's why I said, I'm really going to try hard to get through all of these, and at the same time, give you guys as much wisdom as I can today. So the 4 phases within a therapeutic community is orientation, primary phase, community living, and transition and continuing care. I'm going to go into each of them in a second, but just wanted you guys to understand it. And often at times it's not just kind of a linear path. Sometimes we have, our residents, and they might struggle as they head into phase 3, and they might go back down to phase 2, and that's okay. It just means that there's something else they need to learn, gather, change about themselves before they move back to phase 3 or before they move out into the world. As recovery can be, often recovery isn't just a linear process. Sometimes it's up and down and moving around at places. So we try to get to understand that the phases are the same thing. Okay, phase 1. And so in phase 1, orientation phase, this is when a new resident is coming into care. This is when a new resident is kind of sussing the place out, going, what's going on here? They're getting to understand the structure. They're meeting with other residents, and hopefully having a senior resident kind of take them under their wing to show them community structure, be able to understand kind of the core components of a therapeutic community, which is things like community as method, right living components. So they're being able to demonstrate adherence to the therapeutic community. The first 2 are really important on here. They're going to stabilize physically based on you're going to get support from your medical team. We're going to begin to stabilize emotionally and cognitively. And I always use that word begin here because, as we know, with addiction, and it can take a while for somebody to stabilize emotionally and cognitively. When we factor in mental health, when we factor in trauma, it might take a while for somebody to really stabilize and start trusting when it comes to those components. So we always use that word begin because that is always going on throughout the process within a therapeutic community. We're going to start talking about involved with addiction. We're going to start understanding the TC, or therapeutic community model. And we're going to start, and this one's a really important one, beginning to communicate on a feeling level. Addiction kind of tries to stuff all of our emotions away and be able to kind of say, don't talk about it, don't feel it, don't deal with that emotion, push that aside, put it on the shelf, whatever you want to say, or we use to numb ourselves out. Okay. When we have somebody in therapeutic community, when they are starting to trust, they're starting to feel part of, they're starting to belong, they're going to start giving access to more of their emotions and being able to kind of allow those emotions to be able to talk about them, to learn with things like DBT skills, how to have emotional, be able to kind of modulate and regulate our emotions. And so beginning to learn about, okay, this is what sad feels like. Okay, I'm sad right now, and that's okay. I don't have to mood alter through it. This is what anger feels like, and anger's okay. It's not a bad emotion as long as I'm talking about it versus acting up kind of stuff. So really important outcomes when it comes to orientation, but really this is the stabilization phase. It's understanding the therapeutic community, getting to understand the rules and regulations, and feeling part of. Primary treatment. So this is a really important phase. So phase 2 is probably one of the longer phases within the therapeutic community. And again, there's no specific length of time that takes each individual to go through these phases. Everybody's unique, everybody's different, everybody has different needs. And so where one person might stabilize quickly in phase 1 orientation, they might have gone to treatment before, they might understand process, but they might struggle in phase 2. It's different for everybody. And so, we have, we can give you specific length of stay or length of times that it usually takes a quote unquote average person, but we don't have average people. We're dealing with unique individuals, unique humans in these places. Primary treatment. So this is where, again, we're talking more about our feelings. We're using some of our DBT and our CBT skills. We have greater awareness of how addiction has affected their life and relationships with others. A really important one is, how has my family, how has my community, how has my spirituality been affected, my culture been affected, and being able to kind of learn about that so then I can, again, make some shifts to change. Begins to demonstrate increased motivation for recovery. As you guys have probably heard, in some of the older literature, there's phrases like fake it till you make it, or DBT tells us, just to kind of at time, we have to do some radical acceptance. And sometimes if somebody's just learning about getting into recovery and learning about giving up that primary relationship, that relationship with alcohol and drugs, that's been the most important thing in their life for years, that's been their like the thing that they've survived with, like that's a really important thing to kind of say, like, what does recovery look like for me? We're developing more awareness of distorted beliefs, and new beliefs begin to form. I love that one because with the positive reinforcement, with the kind of concept of, being able to support somebody when they're doing some amazing work in the therapeutic community, new beliefs about themselves start to emerge. And I'm not talking about sunshine and roses, that everybody starts loving themselves, but they get to stop and say, instead of like, I'm a mess up, they get to say, like, I did well today. They have a lot of people that are kind of reinforcing when they do new pro-social behaviors, and they start to kind of take that on more instead of that badge or that shield of addiction that they've used for so long. They get willing to ask for help in completing weekly and daily goals, and they show genuine behavioral change as a result of gaining insight into their addictive thoughts and behaviors. That one's a really important one because, again, I think of things like the average change pattern, and it takes an average person. I think the stats say something like 86 times to change a habit or a behavior. And yet when we're asking these guys to change so much about their life. So I want you to think of this. I want you to think of like, if you say golf with your left hand, play hockey with your left hand, pitch with your left hand, any of that stuff, and suddenly somebody says you can't use your left hand anymore, and I want you to pitch, play hockey, I want you to throw balls, whatever it may be, with your right hand. And so suddenly your left hand's behind your back, you can't use that one anymore, and you got to start using this right one. I want you to imagine how awkward that would be, and how long it would take for you to build any mastery of skill for using your right hand instead of your left hand, which you were so comfortable with. That's what we're asking them to do with so many different areas of their life when they come into a therapeutic community. We're asking them to not only shine the light on, deficits in the past that have hurt them, that pain and trauma that they haven't spoke about, sadness or grief that they haven't dealt with, old behaviors and old coping stances that probably were survival mechanisms, but now get in their way. We're asking them to shine light on that, and also to slowly change that. And so this is a big piece of the therapeutic community, which is that concept of compassion as well. Being able to, and Lindsay will talk a little bit later about progressive disciplinary action that we take. If somebody is struggling, this isn't about us shaking a finger at them, but it's rather about helping them back out of the corner and say, like, how do we teach you how to do this different? How do we give you this space to reflect on it and have some different kind of learnings when it comes to this? So the primary treatment process is a really important one. And we want to spend, lots of time here. This is when they're spending time with their BHN, which we call the behavioral health navigators. These are people that work within our organization that are counselors and really bring with them their lived experience, that kind of stuff, to support people on this journey. They're spending lots of time with them, lots of time with their community, and slowly changing those behaviors. So I could talk about primary treatment all day. I know that I can't do that today, so I'm going to move on to phase 3. Phase 3 is community living outcomes. And so when we're talking about this one, this is when we're starting to have our residents start to look to the outside world again and say, like, what is it they want to do? Like, they're peering over there and they're saying, like, maybe I want to take a trade on. Maybe I want to learn more about becoming a recovery coach. Maybe I want to get into the field myself, because what we're always hoping about is that we're building a workforce. We're supporting all of the therapeutic communities, all of the people that are on the screen with us to help them get these amazing new staff that are going to join their group. So, this is where our residents are volunteering, they're looking at employment, they're looking at education, we're doing vocational training with them to kind of like raise that piece of like, what do I want to do with my life? Often people have to change careers, or they might not be able to go back to the old career that they had that was facilitating their addiction. And so, it might be that they have to get creative and go like, okay, maybe I want to get into the food service industry. And so we help them get things like food safe as a certificate. So they're making them ability to get a job more. And so this is a really important one because we want them to dream. We want to think. We want them to kind of go like, what do I want to do with my future? How do I want to live in a life that's not shrouded by trauma and shrouded by shame and addiction, but actually with hope and excitement? Because when I talk to people that I know in recovery, that's what their life is about. It still can be a struggle and it still can be a process, but it has hope attached to it, and it has emotions and connection and community. So in this phase, we're also hoping they're really demonstrating and understanding the TC concepts in their language and everyday behavior. They are being leaders in our organization. As I said earlier, when we were talking about people in orientation, I was talking about the idea that, sometimes we hope our seniors or our leaders in our organization take on and support the people that are in orientation to be able to kind of help them kind of move along this phases. And so people in community living, these are our guys that have maybe leadership jobs within our facility. They're kind of running small groups or crews of people to make sure that the facility is running smoothly in support with the team that works there. We want to be able to, possibly begin peer support training. I love that recovery coach of Alberta will come into different organizations and teach the Recovery Ally program, which is that idea of getting people ready if they want to become recovery coaches. We want them to be able to start looking at like, what is it that fits for me as a possible recovery support, whether it be AA, NA, SMART, Dharma, culture, community, religion, whatever it may be. But what is going to work for me for my recovery supports in my community? And so we want them to start kind of doing some research on that, being aware of it. What works for me? What do I like? What do I not like? And making informed decisions about all of that. We want them to be able to demonstrate success at their work and leadership roles in the therapeutic community and be supported for that. And again, provide feedback to other residents regularly and other staff regularly. That's an important piece as well. As staff, we're always open to feedback as well of things that we can do differently. And continue to discuss post-treatment plans and any challenges that may arise. Okay. Phase 4, this is when we're really looking at that community transition and continuing care outcomes. So, we are planning about whether it be have recovery contacts in their home community or has developed alternative plans that support recovery. This is an important one. Not everybody can return to their prior community yet. Sometimes they need more time in a recovery home or post-treatment support that can allow them to kind of, again, practice these skills out in the community, kind of put one foot out there, but still have a lot of support. And so this might be sober living, this might be post-treatment, this might be, just another level of support that's there before somebody goes back into community. They're following their planners honestly and completely. They're holding other people accountable. They're looking at employment and education opportunities outside the TC, and they're using whatever employment opportunities or education opportunities that are being offered within the TC, so to be able to kind of really gather, like, what is it I want to do? Look at all options. This one's a really important one. It's just like, these are the leaders in our community. If there's something that somebody's struggling, if the community's struggling, us as staff are going to these people to say, hey, give us a hand on this one. Let's get our community back on track. They are completing their continuing care plan in consultation with staff, and they're demonstrating the awareness of importance of following all aspects of continuing care program. And so really understanding of when I do put myself out there into my next step in my recovery world, what does that look like? As they say, half measures avail us nothing in the recovery literature. This is about being able to say, like, I want to be able to get out there and do everything I can. I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay now, and she's going to talk a little bit about phase progression, but also struggles people might have and how we deal with them.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. A question's also just come in about what TC means, and it's therapeutic community, and it's what the recovery communities is based on, the model it's based on. And to find out more about that, it's in the provincial manual for recovery communities, and there's lots of information on there.
And some great books on it.
There's some amazing books.
Yeah.
Red Book, Georgia de Leon is a world favourite, and a fan favourite here as well at Lakeview. If anyone wants to read, they are quite expensive though, so you might see if there's one at the library. Okay then, so moving back to the presentation, thank you, Elizabeth, for going through all of the outcomes. Now, as Elizabeth said earlier on, we don't delegate any sort of the phase movement. It's all done on an individual, personalised basis. And the way that we move people through the phases is directed by the resident. So essentially, at the end, coming towards the end of each phase, the resident themselves will have an opportunity to reflect on where they've come from, where they've been, what they've learned, but also demonstrate as well how they've met these outcomes. And they can do that by what we use at Lakeview, the phase progression package, which essentially is a document that the resident takes on, full introduction on there, but also it's divided into sections in relation to all of these outcomes. And they need to provide evidence of how they can demonstrate this at this point in time. So there's an example here about community as method, which is the basic methodology in therapeutic community, utilising the community as a change agent. So what does that mean to that person? And how have they kind of embodied that and embraced that? This also, in the phase progressions, is also a time for senior residents and people around this individual to co-sign and provide feedback to this person as well, whether that be developmental feedback or really positive feedback about how they've changed during that phase. And also as well, as I said, the BHN, which is the Behavioural Health Navigator, they will also co-sign this document as well, which is then handed it to the program director, who will then look and take into consideration all of the movement and all of the change that's occurred during that phase, but also have that hand in hand with behaviour and outcomes of what we see, and if people are role modelling this and not just writing it down on paper. And that's why it's important that a number of people also support this phase progression as well. It is part of community as method to get feedback off your peers. So it's important that, I think on this paperwork, especially for phase 2 to 3, at least 5 peers need to support the move. Because when you move up into phase 3, you are going to be a senior resident, you are going to be a role model within this community, and you should be able to embody everything that the TC requires as a role model. I will say though, and Elizabeth mentioned a little bit earlier, that it will come on to progressive kind of disciplinary action. Not everyone all the time gets a positive answer for these progression packages. And some people can be knocked back at times, and that might be because of behaviour, and they're not showing that behaviour in the day-to-day. When that happens, the BHM will sit down with the client and maybe some of the senior residents and talk through what that looks like, and talk through an action plan as part of the treatment planning process of what will that look like for them to then demonstrate these behaviours and assignment work to move forward. And also as well, a little bit away from the phase progression paperwork, but essentially that progressive disciplinary action, we will work with people. Something may happen, or a rule, whether smaller rules may be breached. We will work with someone. We're working with people who potentially have had entrenched thinking and behaviours, over a lifetime. So we know things are going to happen from time to time. There may be, rule breaches, or someone may swear, or someone may not be able to time keep appropriately to a group on time. So we work with an individual to point out what they need to focus on and what they need to do to move forward, basically. And initially, the residents themselves will take responsibility and take in giving that feedback through what we call our pull-up and push-up system. Pull-ups providing developmental feedback, but also push-ups affirming really positive behaviour and going a little bit above and beyond. We then also, on that progression system for action, we will look at mediation. We have what we call accountability groups as well, where a group of people will speak to someone directly about a behaviour affecting them to look at potential process for change. We also at Lakeview utilise assignment work, but also behaviour agreements as well, where someone will have all of these actions down over the next kind of 4-week period, things that they need to work towards, things that they need to demonstrate behaviour work in order to then move forward and remain in treatment. Okay, so I'm going to just move on. If someone can press the button for me, thank you. So I just wanted to just focus on treatment planning. I think most of us will be aware of treatment planning working in the recovery field. I'm just going to say from a lens and from a recovery community point of view, but essentially what we said earlier, treatment planning should support a whole person approach. It's not just about addiction, it's about spiritual, behavioural, mental health, it's about family, friends, it's about everything that makes that individual there. So essentially, treatment plans here should be collaborative, they should be person-centred, and they really should be strength-based. And we generally will do an initial treatment plan as early as possible, and generally within that first 72 hours, following appropriate medical and psychological assessment if that's required. The treatment plan really needs to reflect the residents' culture, their goals, their learning style as well, but also their values. And I'm going to say again, to make sure that it is strength-based. To also ensure as well that it is aligned with those phase outcomes, so we can then support on an individual basis and group basis the individual moving through those phases. And generally, we will review and rewrite a treatment plan once per phase, or if there's been any incident in service, also at the resident request, and when goals have been met, so we can then set others to support that progression and that move. Next slide, please. I am noticing there's some questions popping up, but we'll come back to those just a little bit later. So just to put further emphasis on the treatment plan components, and really that whole person approach, which we aim to achieve within a therapeutic community. So we make sure that from a very, very early stage that there's a safety plan, a safety in relation to exit planning in process. We know that transitions from service to service can be quite a challenging time for individuals. So it's making sure that if anything was to happen or a placement was destabilised, that we've got an exit plan in place and backup plan for this person moving forward. That also includes like relapse prevention and crisis response procedures. We focus on life skill development. I know quite a lot of the outcomes that Elizabeth was speaking about really kind of focus on these points from life skill and functional abilities and vocational and educational. At Lakeview, we've got a lot of emphasis on our PPP, our Purposeful Pathways programme, essentially getting people job ready and learning different skills that they can utilise in the workforce. Just looking at some of the data for Lakeview, for example, for the last year and a half, the majority of the people that have been here are working age men between 25 and 45. So it's essential that we encourage people to learn different vocational and employability skills and increase those life skills as well. We also focus on recreation and physical wellness. those program progression and those outcomes, but also as well looking at focusing on next stages and housing and what that transition planning is going to look like. Of course, we look at substance misuse and the patterns and breaking down any sort of patterns with that and working through that, and looking at strategies to support behaviour modification and support for relapse prevention in the future. All cultural and spiritual needs that we will focus on an individual basis, and also the family, social and community supports. Family are a huge support. We have what we call our Lakeview family at Lakeview, which is all of the residents and our entire community, residents and staff. But we also see family, and whether that's family or family by choice, essential to someone's recovery journey and support to move forward and that sustainable recovery within the future. And then just to focus on, I know there's questions going in, but I am going to come back to them a little bit later when I finish this slide. So recovery skill development and application. So just to encompass quite a lot of the outcomes that Elizabeth did discuss, we really focus on, in a recovery community, those communal and social skills. It's like living in a community. It's knowing and looking after your neighbour. For me, I often say it's old school kind of community skills that we've lost in the age of 2025 with kind of social media and TVs and things like that. Essentially, that it's knowing who your neighbour is and looking after them, and being a healthy participant in a community as well. Being able to set boundaries, being able to resolve conflict healthily, and being able to build those relationships. Also, to just focus on the cognitive and emotional skills, things like problem solving, emotional regulation, understanding patterns of use and identifying triggers, but also strategies as well to build that self-efficacy and confidence. In relation to behavioural and recovery maintenance skills, we focus on being able to cope with cravings and relapse prevention, stress management skills, mind-body grounding and mindfulness. There's quite a lot of wellness that we will put into the programme here, and also social support. We know that recovery can be quite a hard slog at times. So as part of a recovery community, yes, we focus on all the challenging things, but we also make it fun and enjoyable to be here as well. We need to find enjoyment in new things. And so we put on quite a lot of different elements to focus on: health, wellness, self-care, and fun.
Didn't you do Lakeview Has Talent as an example? I think that was one of the funnest things, where I was hearing about all of these people and they're up there, and this was a talent show, or and there was people singing and acting and dancing and doing kind of different spiritual pieces, and yeah, it was hilarious and fabulous.
Yeah, and from that, we now have a band at Lakeview. The residents are actually hosting the Christmas party on Saturday, and we have a jazz performance apparently on Saturday, which we've been working on. So just to give you an idea, it just brings together various different components that really supports the development of that whole person. So on that note, I'm going to hand back over to Elizabeth. Thank you.
Oh, now you have me anticipatory, thinking about this new band that I get to hear. Yeah. We had a celebration at our 1 year as an example, and we had, again, same thing. Our residents, they have a band. It was called the Rogue Waves, and they were great. And they played a bunch of 90s tunes, so of course I knew all the words because that's my demographic, and it was fabulous. But they created, again, as Lindsay talks about, that fun atmosphere. Recovery and the recovery work that we get to them to do is, it's the tough groups with the crying and the snot bubbles at times, I like to joke, but at the same time, it's balanced out with that fun, with that play, with that, learning about becoming work ready. It's a very important kind of mixture of different things that we're doing, adding culture to it, everything. Okay, I'll get back to my slide though. I apologize, Lindsay. You're talking about the bands there. It's always exciting. So part of the modalities that we really believe are important in kind of doing this work within therapeutic communities is we want to make sure that we're doing a mixture of modalities to really support each person as an individual. So of course we're using CBT, which helps us recognize the distortions in the brain, and then it helps again with those skill-based activities on how to change this. We're doing, things like motivational interviewing. That's a huge one. A lot of our staff are having to, getting to get to have creative conversations with people as they're motivating them, because sometimes in early recovery, it can seem like a pretty daunting hill that they're climbing. We're using trauma-informed care models. We use things like Seeking Safety by Lisa Najavitz. We call it slow down skills to try to, make it a little bit less scary sounding. And really, like we're using relapse prevention, theory and practice. DBT skills and CBT skills and MI, that's kind of like the three-legged stool of what we do a lot of in the therapeutic processes. And so we're teaching things like, mindfulness, emotional regulation, be able to recognize the thought patterns, being able to kind of motivate and stay in that place of like, okay, I can do this, and being able to really look at the same time relapse prevention, what are my recovery skill development. And then, of course, we are trying to be as culturally informed and as possible, and looking at with each individual what they need for support. And I love the fact that, at Lakeview and hopefully within more of our therapeutic communities, where they're able to approach and engage with different Indigenous healing approaches, but also elders, knowledge keepers. We've had drummers come in, singers come in, beaters come in, and it's so beautiful to see how the community reacts and connects to it as people are reconnecting to their culture. So yeah, a whole host of therapeutic approaches, but really like what we're talking about is best practice. Best practice says we have to work with, the brain, be able to kind of look at our distortions, be able to kind of look at kind of our emotional regulation so that we're not stuffing things in addiction anymore, be able to recognize relapse skills, use motivational interviewing, and at the same time be able to really kind of support culture throughout this as well. Case reviews is a really important part of this process. And so as we think of all of the processes that Lindsay was talking about, whether it be with, the progressive disciplinary action or the phase progression, when you think of all the processes that I was talking about, just the little intricate part of each phase that we do, each phases as well have, a multitude of assignments and processes and groups that are attached to them. And so we're supporting people as we go along. But case reviews are really important. So people, whether it be a counselor, therapist, BHN, support staff, recovery coach, whoever's kind of helping and supporting that individual at your organization, has a place to come to where they get to talk to their group of people, where they get to say, hey, this is how Bobby's doing. This is what I've got them working on. This is how I'm supporting. This is their treatment plan. How are you guys seeing Bobby? What kind of ideas do you have? And so it's a real collaborative approach to care. And so when we say regular attendees should include your clinical lead or clinical director, recovery coaches, and so the people that are seeing them after hours if possible, because I always think, I sometimes think that people's behaviors change when mom goes home kind of thing. The behavioral health navigators in other organizations are called counselors or therapists, support staff, medical staff if possible, and cultural or spiritual support personnel when relevant. And so we want to be able to kind of review on a weekly basis, how people are doing, what do they need? Do we need to shift and adapt their treatment plan? Was something that we're working on just not the most prevalent thing, and we need to kind of pivot and go over here and focus on this for a while? Do they need more of one thing and less of another thing? Do we need to get them more support with their community? And so there's constant kind of looking at like, how do we do this and how do we support each individual? So each case review must produce a clear documentation and actionable, and I love that word, actionable next steps, because this isn't just a group of people sitting around talking about, but like, what are we going to do to support this person moving forward? What's the actionable next steps, which are then fed into the treatment plan? I apologize. I let my bulldog in the room, and I fear that she's snoring loud and people can hear her. So I apologize if there's a low rumbling going on behind me. It's my one of my bulldogs, Dolly Parton, and I apologize for her noise.
Okay then, thank you, Elizabeth.